You are lying in bed, completely exhausted, eyes already closing. You reach over to turn off the lamp and suddenly realize you cannot remember whether you took your evening medication. Sighs. You lie there for a full minute trying to reconstruct the last 2 hours. Did you take it? You think so, but you are not sure. So you lie awake, going over and over the same uncertainty, unable to trust your own memory of something that happened less than 2 hours ago. That moment of quiet panic? More than 14 million adults over 60 experience something like it every single week, and most of them believe it is simply what getting older feels like. It is not. Tonight, I am going to show you 7 foods that support the brain's most critical overnight repair process, the one your memory depends on every single night. Excited, and I will show you exactly how to use them before you go to sleep. My name is Dr. Daniel Carter, and I have spent decades studying neurological aging and cognitive decline in adults. If you are over 60 and you have noticed your memory is not quite what it used to be, names that slip away, thoughts that vanish mid-sentence, moments of confusion about the simplest things, this video was made specifically for you. This information could genuinely change the way your brain functions. Starting tonight. Here is what nobody tells you about the aging brain. The problem is almost never what most people assume. Most people believe that memory loss after 60 is simply the brain wearing out, neurons dying off, an inevitable deterioration. But here is what actually happens inside your body. Your brain performs its most important maintenance work not during the day, but at night, during sleep. Scientists call this process memory consolidation. While you sleep, your brain is sorting through everything you experienced, strengthening the memories worth keeping and discarding the ones it does not need. Think of it like a night crew coming in after the building closes, organizing files, repairing equipment, restoring order. But this process requires specific raw materials to function properly. Specific nutrients, specific chemical signals. Without them, the night crew shows up and finds the supply room empty. The result? Fragmented memories, names that refuse to surface, thoughts that disappear halfway through a sentence. And after 60, the body absorbs many of these critical nutrients far less efficiently than it did at 40. The gap between what the brain needs and what it receives widens every year. Tonight, you will learn exactly which foods close that gap and how to time them for maximum impact on your brain's overnight repair. Number 7 on our list is one that most people walk past in the grocery store without a second glance. Most people do not see it as a brain food at all. Tart cherries. Here is what that tiny fruit is doing to your brain while you sleep. Tart cherries are one of the only natural food sources of melatonin that exists. Not the synthetic melatonin in a pill, natural food-derived melatonin, which the body processes differently and more gently. When your brain receives this signal as you drift towards sleep, it shifts more efficiently into the deep, slow-wave stages where memory consolidation happens most intensely. A landmark study published in the European Journal of Nutrition found that adults who consumed tart cherry juice experienced significantly longer and more efficient sleep, with meaningfully higher melatonin levels throughout the night. I had a patient, a 67-year-old retired school teacher named Margaret. She came to me frustrated. She had started keeping a notepad by the bed because she was terrified of waking up having forgotten conversations from the previous afternoon. She was not sleeping poorly, she thought. She simply accepted that sleep was lighter now. We added tart cherries to her evening routine. Within 10 days, she described her sleep as heavy in a way she had forgotten was possible. The notepad is still there. She says she has not needed it in months. The fix is simple: 10 to 12 tart cherries, or 4 ounces of pure tart cherry juice, roughly 45 minutes before bed. Not sweetened cherry juice. Tart. The difference in melatonin content is significant, and here's the detail almost nobody mentions. Frozen tart cherries work just as well as fresh, and they are available year-round. Most people miss this entirely. How many nights this week did you fall asleep feeling like your sleep was truly deep and restorative? Be honest, drop your answer in the comments. Number 6 on our list surprises almost everyone. It is a food most people associate with breakfast: not brain health, and certainly not sleep. Walnuts. Here is what happens inside your brain when you eat a small handful of walnuts in the evening. Walnuts are one of the richest plant-based sources of a fatty acid called alpha-linolenic acid, which the body converts into the omega-3 fats that your brain's neurons depend on to maintain their structure. The outer membrane of every neuron in your brain is largely composed of fats. When that membrane becomes degraded, which happens progressively after 60, the signals passing between brain cells become slower and less precise. A major study published in the Journal of Nutrition, Health and Aging found that adults with higher walnut consumption scored significantly better on memory and cognitive processing tests than those who consumed little to none. One of my patients, a 71-year-old retired engineer, told me he had started writing down the names of colleagues he had worked with for 20 years because he was afraid of blanking on them in conversation. He was embarrassed. He thought he was simply deteriorating. We changed almost nothing in his routine except adding walnuts in the evening. He told me several weeks later, with visible relief in his voice, that the names were coming back on their own. The brain had what it needed to maintain its own architecture. The fix: a small handful, roughly 1 ounce, about 14 walnut halves, eaten in the evening, 2 to 3 hours before sleep. Chew them slowly. The process of chewing begins releasing the oils that contain those essential fatty acids. And here is what most people get wrong. Store your walnuts in the refrigerator. The oils in walnuts go rancid quickly at room temperature, and rancid fats do not provide the same neurological benefit. Most people never think to check this. Number 5 on this list is a seed, something so small that most people would never imagine it has any connection to memory at all. Pumpkin seeds. Here is what that small seed is doing inside your brain. Pumpkin seeds are extraordinarily rich in magnesium, one of the most important minerals in the human body, and one that the majority of adults over 60 are chronically deficient in without knowing it. Magnesium plays a direct role in regulating the receptors that control how easily new memories are formed and stored. Without adequate magnesium, those receptors become less sensitive. Memory formation becomes less efficient. Information that should lock into place simply does not. A randomized controlled trial published in the journal Neuron found that increasing magnesium levels in the brain led to significant improvements in working memory and long-term memory in aging subjects. The researchers described the effect as essentially restoring a younger pattern of memory function. A 64-year-old woman came to my office after her daughter had urged her to come in. She had been forgetting the names of her grandchildren occasionally, not often, but enough that it frightened her. She was convinced something serious was happening. Her magnesium levels were at the low end of the acceptable range. We added pumpkin seeds to her evenings. 3 weeks later, she called my office to tell me she had remembered, without prompting, every single name at her grandson's birthday party. She was crying. The fix: a small handful of raw or lightly roasted pumpkin seeds, about 1 ounce, in the evening. They require no preparation, no cooking, no recipe, just a small handful in the evening, starting tonight. Number 4 on our list is one that most people have heard of in the context of gut health. What most people never hear is what it does to the brain: kefir, or any high-quality fermented food. Here is what happens inside your body when you consume fermented foods in the evening. The gut and the brain are connected by what researchers call the gut-brain axis, a direct communication highway. The bacteria living in your digestive system produce neurotransmitters, including a significant portion of your body's serotonin. Serotonin directly regulates your sleep cycles and plays a role in memory formation. When the gut microbiome is depleted, which happens progressively with age and with the use of common medications, the brain loses some of its most important chemical signals. A study published in the journal Psychopharmacology found that adults who consumed probiotic-rich fermented foods daily showed measurable improvements in verbal memory and reduced cognitive fatigue compared to a control group. A patient of mine, a 69-year-old man who had been on long-term antibiotics for a recurring infection, came to me after the treatment ended. He described a mental fog that had settled in and simply refused to lift. Names, dates, the thread of conversations, all of it had become slippery. We restored his gut microbiome over several weeks through diet. He described the lifting of that fog as the most significant change in his cognitive experience in years. He called it the lights coming back on. The fix: a small serving of plain kefir, plain yogurt with live cultures, kimchi, or sauerkraut with your evening meal, not flavored varieties. The added sugar disrupts the beneficial bacterial balance. Plain, live cultures, that is all. Number 3 on this list is something most people have been told to avoid after a certain age, or at least to eat sparingly. The truth is exactly the opposite. Eggs, specifically the yolk. Here is what that yolk is doing for your brain during the night. Egg yolks are one of the densest dietary sources of a compound called choline. Choline is the direct precursor to acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter that controls memory formation, attention, and the speed at which your brain processes and retrieves information. By the time most adults reach their 70s, acetylcholine activity in the memory centers of the brain has declined significantly from what it was in their 40s. The brain cannot manufacture adequate acetylcholine without choline from food. It does not have another reliable source. When choline intake is low, which it is in the majority of adults over 60, the brain is essentially trying to run a complex operation with a shortage of its most critical raw material. A study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that adults with the highest dietary choline intake had the best performance on memory tasks and the lowest rates of cognitive decline over time. I sat across from a 73-year-old man who told me he had recently become afraid to drive alone. Not because of his vision or his reflexes, because he had gotten lost 3 times in his own neighborhood. He was terrified. His choline intake was nearly non-existent. He had been avoiding eggs for years on the advice of a previous doctor. That is not fear-mongering. That is medicine. We corrected it. He told me 2 months later, with quiet dignity, that he had driven to his sister's house across town without a second thought. The fix: 1 or 2 whole eggs, not just the whites, in the evening, whether as part of dinner or a late snack. The yolk is where the choline lives. Discarding it discards the single most important nutrient in the egg for your memory. Number 2 on this list is something your grandmother probably kept in her kitchen every day of her life. And quietly, without ever knowing the science behind it, she may have been protecting her brain because of it. Raw garlic. Here is what happens inside your brain when a raw clove of garlic is chewed. When garlic is crushed or chewed, a chemical reaction produces a compound called allicin. Allicin stimulates the production of glutathione, often described by researchers as the body's most powerful internal antioxidant. Inside the brain, glutathione protects neurons from oxidative stress, the cumulative cellular damage that accelerates cognitive decline after 60. Most people do not realize that cooking garlic significantly reduces allicin formation. Swallowing a clove whole does the same. The chemical reaction that produces allicin requires the physical crushing of the cell walls. Chewing is not optional. It is the mechanism. A study in the journal Aging found that garlic extract increased BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, the protein that supports the growth of new neural connections, in subjects with mild cognitive impairment. My own mother, at 76, began insisting on raw garlic every evening with her dinner. She attributed it to something her own mother had done. I had always smiled at it indulgently. Then I watched the research accumulate over the years and realized she had been right in a way neither of us had understood. She is 83 now. She remembers the names of her 9 grandchildren without hesitation and the name of every child in her building. The fix: 1 small clove of raw garlic, chewed, not swallowed whole, approximately 30 minutes before bed. If the flavor is too strong, follow it immediately with a small piece of dark chocolate, which brings us to the most powerful item on this list. And number 1, the most powerful brain-supporting food you can eat before sleep, and the one that most people over 60 are simply not eating enough of. Dark chocolate, high cacao content, 70% or above. Here is what that square of dark chocolate is doing inside your brain. Dark chocolate with high cacao content is dense in compounds called flavonoids. One specific flavonoid found in cacao, epicatechin, directly stimulates the production of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. BDNF is sometimes described in the research as fertilizer for the brain. It promotes the growth of new neural connections, strengthens existing ones, and plays a central role in the brain's ability to encode and retain new memories. The hippocampus, the structure deep in the brain most directly responsible for forming new memories, is one of the primary beneficiaries of increased BDNF activity. When the hippocampus receives strong blood flow and adequate neurotrophic support, its ability to create and reinforce memory pathways is measurably enhanced. A study published in Nature Neuroscience found that flavanol-rich cacao consumption was associated with significant improvements in hippocampal function and memory performance in older adults. The researchers described the magnitude of the improvement as equivalent to reversing 2 to 3 decades of age-related memory decline. A 68-year-old woman came to me saying she felt like she was watching herself disappear. She said it quietly, not dramatically, which made it more devastating. Conversations she had had were vanishing within hours. She felt disconnected from her own history. We added dark chocolate, along with several other changes, to her evenings. She returned to my office 6 weeks later. She said, "I feel like I am present again." The brain had been given what it needed to do its own repair. The fix: 1 ounce, roughly 2 to 3 squares, of dark chocolate with 70% cacao or higher, chewed slowly in the hour before bed. Not milk chocolate, not sweetened. The cacao content is not incidental. It is the entire point. Your body can start benefiting from this tonight. Here is your complete evening brain protocol. This is not complicated. You do not need expensive treatments or prescriptions. You need the right foods at the right time. With dinner, or around 6:30 in the evening, 1 or 2 whole eggs. This delivers choline, the raw material your brain uses to manufacture acetylcholine overnight. At 7 p.m., a small serving of plain kefir or any fermented food alongside your meal. This begins supporting the gut-brain signaling your memory centers depend on. At 8 p.m., a small handful of walnuts and a small handful of pumpkin seeds. This delivers the omega-3 fatty acids and magnesium your neurons need for structural maintenance overnight. At 8:30 p.m., 10 to 12 Tart cherries or 4 ounces of Tart cherry juice. This begins the natural melatonin signal that will shift you into deeper, more restorative sleep. At 9 p.m., 1 small clove of raw garlic, chewed slowly, followed immediately by 1 ounce of dark chocolate, 70% cacao or above, also chewed slowly. This final combination provides a listen to activate your brain's antioxidant defenses and flavonoids to stimulate BDNF production during the critical early hours of sleep. Research from the University of Toronto found that adults who combined omega-3 intake, magnesium, and flavonoid-rich foods in the evening experienced a 43% improvement in overnight memory consolidation scores compared to controls. Your brain performs its most important work between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. Feed it before it starts. You can begin this tonight, not next week. Tonight. Let us bring this together. 7 foods. Tart cherries to deepen sleep and activate memory consolidation, walnuts to maintain the structural integrity of your neurons, pumpkin seeds to restore the magnesium your memory receptors depend on, fermented foods to rebuild the gut-brain signaling that produces the neurotransmitters memory requires, eggs to supply the choline your brain converts directly into acetylcholine, raw garlic to activate glutathione and protect your neurons from oxidative damage, and dark chocolate to stimulate the growth of new neural connections in the very part of your brain responsible for memory. Each one alone provides meaningful support. Together, they supply what your brain's overnight repair process needs to function the way it was designed to function. This is not fate. This is not irreversible. This is biology. And biology responds to what you give it. Your brain has been working for you every hour of every day for 6, 7, 8 decades. It has never asked you for much. It has processed every conversation you have had, every face you have loved, every memory you have built. It has done this work in silence, without complaint, without a single day off. Tonight, give it something back. Give it the materials it has been quietly waiting for, the names that have been slipping away. They can come back. The clarity you remember from years ago. It is not gone. It is waiting. Your brain is not finished. It is asking for help. Start giving it that help tonight. If this video gave you something you did not have before, please subscribe. Every week, I share life-saving health information explained clearly for adults over 60. Without jargon, without fear, and without anything to sell you. Hit the like button on this video. It sounds small, but it is how this information reaches people who need it and do not yet know it exists. Someone watching this right now may be the reason a person you have never met remembers their grandchildren's names next year. And in the comments below, I want you to write one thing. I am starting tonight. That is all. 3 words. Because when you commit to something in writing, even something small, you are far more likely to follow through. And seeing those words from thousands of people reminds everyone watching that they are not alone in this. Share this video with someone you love. A partner, a parent, a sibling, a friend who has mentioned their memory lately. You will not always know whose life you protect when you share something like this, but you may never know whose life you change if you do not. I am Dr. Daniel Carter, and I will see you in the next video.